You're listening to a CNA podcast.
Hi, it's the Work It podcast with me, Tiffany Ang, but my wise co-host Gerald is not in the studio with me today. We're going to do something a little different. At the end of each month, I'll be sitting down with a colleague from CNA Today to discuss a work-related issue. So if you aren't already an ardent reader of CNA Today, you should, because each weekend, there are great feature stories you don't want to miss. One of the big topics that CNA Today covers is about workplace relationships and jobs, especially issues that relate to millennials and Gen Zs. Now today, I've invited columnist Kelvin Carl onto the show to talk about something hot and spicy in the workplace. Welcome, Kelvin.
Hello. Hi.
So you wrote about workplace romances in a CNA Today article which was published yesterday. For the benefit of our listeners, give us a one-liner to describe who you are and what you do when you're not writing for us.
Sure. So I'm Kelvin. I run a social media agency called Protocol. And I also run a cafe called Main Street Commissary.
Oh, cafe. Do you make good coffee?
We would like to think so. Yeah. 4.6 stars on Google reviews, so not too bad.
I trust Google reviews, so yes, it's good coffee. Today, we want to talk about workplace romances. You wrote about this. What prompted you to write about this topic?
It's just one of those fascinating subject matters where, yes, you have your guidelines, you have your MOM and TAFEP, but in reality, romances and relationships do happen. So I thought that might be a fascinating look at what actually happens on the ground.
You are a business owner, and I remember asking you this question when we were chatting on the phone previously. I asked you, are there any couples in your office?
So I did a count actually on my way here. And so as it stands right now, there isn't. But historically, we've had like 5 couples.
Oh.
And it's nice to know actually that 3 of them are still together.
Okay,
so it's actually 5 pairs. And then 3 couples are still together. 1 is married actually.
Oh, wow, not bad. So actually, why are you running a social media agency? You should be running a matchmaking agency.
You know what? We've had that discussion because dating fascinates me. Yeah, I mean, that sort of answers your question as well. I think dating in the workplace actually is really interesting, and just seeing how different relationships across different generations work also is an eye-opening thing for myself actually.
As a business owner, what are some worries you would have if employees start dating one another?
Right. I think the first consideration is always the conflict of interest. It can get awkward if, let's say, if a couple is in a relationship and there are power dynamics at work as well. So I think that's something to immediately discuss about. Sometimes if the company is big enough, you can redesignate certain roles. But in a smaller team like mine, honestly, it may not always be possible.
Yeah.
So then we have to have the discussion, okay, how do we navigate this? How do we do this in a way that does not compromise the work or the environment in the office as well?
So have you had couples who are like in a supervisor-staff sort of relationship?
So in terms of their title or designation,
someone's reporting to the other.
Yes. So there's a sense of like one person is essentially more senior, right?
Yes.
But the way we work is that we work in different teams.
Okay.
So you kind of don't report, but there's definitely a sense of hierarchy in that way also.
Okay, but your boyfriend or your girlfriend is not the one who's going to give you the performance review at the end of the year, right?
So thankfully, we have not had that come into play, but they do have to work very closely together. So that again creates certain considerations that you need to look at.
Yeah, because that I think adds a very big level of complexity to the whole issue. It's not just that it gets personal during performance review time if, let's say, your other half is the one who is giving you the grade, but also within the team as well. People will never be absolutely sure that the good grade that you are giving this person, is it out of a personal reason or is it a very professional reason?
Right. I think that definitely is compromise. And so, by and large, the practice out there, as I understand it, is that they should not be in the same department. They should not report one to another. And certainly the appraisal process cannot be that of someone, a couple in a relationship. So that has to be in place. I think it extends beyond that though, to even simple things like just normal workplace dynamics, right? Are they making others uncomfortable?
That's true.
If they should get into, say, like a quarrel, as couples do, does it then also spill over into work-related issues where they're not speaking to each other or they're clearly not communicating with one another within the team context as well? So that is its own challenge. Thankfully, we've not really had a situation where it required me really stepping in that regard. Does it happen? I do believe so. Yeah.
Did you have to have very clear do's and don'ts or even unspoken ones?
So we have the guidelines. The first thing to do is to actually declare that. That said, even getting them to acknowledge that was already tricky, right?
Yeah. What if I'm just dating? We're not really
Correct.
serious, not exclusive yet, but we've gone on a few dates.
Yes, and there's a sense that, hey, this is a personal matter, right? And yes, I got to know him through work, but we're not dating in the office. We are
Exactly.
going for dinner or drinks after that. But yes, we've stated in our employee handbook that it is a requirement to at least declare,
Okay.
just so that at least we have the conversation. I think that's important.
To me, there are some unspoken no-nos, right? I mean, you shouldn't be all public display of affection as
That's right,
PDA because this is a workplace after all, very professional. And like you say, if you have any disagreements, imagine that you are having a disagreement with your colleague rather than your other half. Make sure that if you are discussing anything, don't exclude the other colleagues, don't have your own little personal jokes.
Yeah. I think the challenge also is, given that they operate in the same physical space, then to also, like you say, establish clear physical boundaries as well. It can be tough because, hey, let's go for lunch, right? And it may be an innocuous thing where typically it's a group lunch, but hey, we just want to have lunch together.
Yeah.
So the team does note incidences like that. And so there needs to be extra mindfulness on the part of the couple for sure, to just make sure, let's just do it as a collective instead of having our own private lunches, much as they have their right to do so as well, right?
Yeah. I guess now is a good time to also talk about if, let's say, I'm a colleague of a couple, like a known office couple, right? And I do feel uncomfortable. I have some queries as to whether their conduct is a bit too intimate for an office setting, or the way that they talk to each other is making me a bit uncomfortable. The way they maybe help each other at work may be a bit uncomfortable for me. So if I'm that colleague, how would you prefer that I approach you, my boss, in talking about this? Because it can be quite an awkward conversation. It feels like maybe, am I overthinking things? Is it like I am just making a mountain out of a molehill? I mean, I don't know.
With these matters, as with actually all issues, I think bring to us your concerns and considerations, meaning don't second guess yourself, right? If you feel uncomfortable, probably there is some good reason for the way you feel. And if there really isn't, then we can get there by talking it through. A lot of times they share their concerns and then they end up in the course of the conversation feeling like, oh, actually it wasn't that big a deal. So it does happen. But the starting point has to be, let's talk it through. And then we can find out a little bit more about how the actual interactions happen, what exactly transpired, what made you feel this way. And then if need be, then we put in certain measures. But the first step is always to have that conversation.
But I should talk to my colleague first, right? Rather than escalate it so quickly to the boss.
That can be tricky, right? Because then, again, team dynamics operate differently. Then there's, again, the power dynamic at play. They may not be able to tell their supervisor, hey, that's kind of weird what you guys are doing, right? So I would say there needs to be a level of trust from the employee to say, I'm going to tell you this. I trust that you will also not overreact and handle this in a fair fashion. You will find out from all parties. So it does go beyond this specific subject matter, but really a safe space where they can air their thoughts and know that you will not overreact. You will not get upset and create an environment to worsen things. But I would like them to bring it up, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I'm also a beneficiary of workplace romance.
Right.
I met my husband in a workplace setting in our previous job. So we're in the same department, in the same team. I wasn't reporting to him, but it was a senior, more junior role that we both had. And we weren't trying to hide from people. If people asked, we would say yes. But I think what helped us for me was that our boss then was very clear in not putting us in the same projects. It allowed me to have some sort of work-life balance. Now, I think a lot of couples would probably say that one of the biggest things that they have with dating a colleague is you always bring work home. You talk to each other about work from your 9 to 5. And then after 5, whether you go home or you go and have your dates or whatever, you're still talking about work.
Yes. I mean, I suppose it's hard to completely separate it out, right? If there are certain issues or things that bother you emotionally at work, you will want to share them with your partner. So I think there's still some room to that. But having those boundaries in place would be helpful for all parties, especially your colleagues and certainly your boss.
Yeah, for sure. I think my boss also appreciated it as well.
Yeah.
And also the other thing is that I have had to learn not to take his professional feedback as a personal attack.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
That's very tough. Because I don't know if you've worked with your wife before, but
yeah.
it's very hard when you are hearing this person correct you on certain things or like making notes and editing your copies or whatever. And then you just go like, do you think I'm stupid? If I'm stupid, why are you dating me?
Right.
But actually, that's probably
That
not what they mean.
escalates
And then it
quickly,
escalates.
right?
And then it becomes like a whole different quarrel
Conversation,
altogether.
yes.
Yeah. Whereas this person is only trying to give professional feedback. But then again, I would argue that sometimes they might feel that, oh, I want you to do better.
Yes,
I want you to be better. So this is something that I would never tell another colleague. So I'm
Yes.
telling you, I didn't find that helpful sometimes.
So, very quick background is I met my wife in school, and then over the course of time, we started the company together. So, yes, we've worked very closely before. Have either of us gotten offended occasionally at corrections, mostly me, in terms of maybe like writing or even speaking, actually,
Yes.
or frankly, attire, hairstyle? And so that happens. I think on that front, we try and give each other the benefit of the doubt in that they mean well. Now, sometimes maybe the delivery can be better, a little gentler. I think both parties can do better, but the ultimate goal is to help the other person. So I think we take it well. That said, you obviously have to go through the process of talking about the level of feedback that you are getting, and maybe the tone wasn't quite right, or I didn't appreciate the edit on that particular piece. Yes, she does edit my work as well, and likewise I do for hers, but come to a place where we can figure that out quite nicely, I think, very amicably, I would say.
Now, let's talk about breakups.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that will linger at the back of your head? You know, what if any of these, I mean, out of the 5 couples you say, so 3, they're still together, so 2, they're not,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
These 2 who are not together right now, did they break up while they were still employed?
So they broke up after they left the company. So in a way, the prerogative for me to have that chat didn't happen. That said, with all the couples that have actually sort of declared, right, that they are a couple, we kind of have a conversation to at least verbally get them to commit to staying professional, not making their colleagues around feel uncomfortable. And in the event of an argument or worst, a breakup, then how we should handle that, right? And I urge them to essentially just stay professional.
But how do
we
you stay
can
professional?
help
No, it's
that,
hard,
right?
no? Yeah, it's almost like you have to be the marriage counselor.
Yes. And especially if they are working closely together in the same team, it's not reasonable to expect that there's no spillover effect, right? Of like the emotions. Breakups are tough. We were fortunate not to have to navigate that, but we have the conversation. Okay, if this happens, what we can do is facilitate a separation in terms of maybe the work that you guys do together. So that's a starting point. But a lot of it has to be on their own in terms of how to manage that level of professionalism. It's in writing. We've spoken about it, but the execution still needs to happen, right?
Yeah,
On their end.
it must be really difficult. Another thing that it's good to talk about is what if one party makes the approach and say, I'm interested in you, I just want to see where it goes, or I want to ask you out for a date, and the feeling is not mutual. Now, things can get quite awkward. Of course, we're not reaching the stage where it's stalkerish yet, because I think then management might need to have to step in.
Yeah.
But then when things get a bit awkward, how do you recover from that if the other person doesn't feel the same feelings? And then how do you come back and work together again?
Yeah. I think this is really where the part of like the power dynamics come into play. I actually had an incident where an intern came to me to express her discomfort at being asked out by drinks by a much more senior team member within the company. So, I mean, there are many factors at play. Actually, one, I mean, we're trying to make judgment, right? But the age difference was actually significant.
Okay.
Right? So I think the intern felt that as well. Like,
Okay, wait, was that person married?
no,
Okay.
it wasn't. So I think the discomfort was in the age gap, the power dynamics, and also a sense that I think she felt initially misled that it was a company outing.
Oh.
And upon further probing, it turned
It
out
was
that
just a
it was
one-on-one.
just a one-on-one. So again, there are many things to dissect from here, but again, is it going to be a straight up no, asking each other out across the board? I don't think that's feasible, not realistic. But at the same time, you do need to be mindful of, hey, power dynamics, perhaps age gap,
Correct.
and you need to read the signals.
Yeah.
Just really be careful with that. What perhaps didn't help was that upon the initial rejection, the person kind of follow up with another one very shortly after. Hey, shall we go for a meal?
What?
And so, again, was it in a sense within his right to ask?
Yeah.
Yes. And she said no, and did he pursue it further? After that, no, he didn't. But it made her feel uncomfortable enough to become a thing.
And she's an intern, right?
Yes,
So
she's an
obviously the intern will start worrying, you know,
Is it
something
going to be awkward
here.
for me? is this going to be a situation where, like, can we work on projects together?
Yeah.
And so that was really awkward.
Yeah.
I can't say we had a solution beyond me really having this discussion with both parties.
So you did separately, you had
Yeah,
conversations
yeah.
with both of them. So what did you tell the older person?
I think it was really more of asking, like, what were your plans for this? And again, in that specific incident, he kind of backed away from it saying, oh, it was just drinks. I'm not interested in her, right? So,
I'm kind of rolling my eyes right now.
yeah, so that's a tricky one, right? Because I
Yes.
can only work with whatever you say.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have to weigh how the other party feels, the context of it. So ultimately, the fact that we brought up this incident made that senior person pretty unhappy, and ultimately he resigned.
Oh.
I'm sure there were other reasons, but
Yeah.
this was certainly a trigger. We weren't accusatory,
No.
but we did have to discuss it to create a safe environment.
Yeah.
We just needed, again, to have that discussion, right?
Yeah. Good on you guys for actually at least just saying that, hey guys, we are aware that this is happening. And if you feel unsafe, you can always approach us.
Right.
Personally, to me, I think that interns are no-no. When it comes to workplace romances, like, look, come on. Again, it's like the whole office, that power dynamics
Yes.
thing, right?
Yeah.
They are young, they're eager to prove themselves, and they may not understand that saying yes to something will have certain consequences, or saying no to certain things will also have its own
That's right,
consequences.
that's right.
Some people, you might argue, may know what they're getting themselves into, but I really personally think that they're still too young. So to me, I think interns are no-no. But then when I told my team this, right, my team was like, what if the person who's asking is only 25 years old and the intern is 21?
Yes.
Then, okay, I can see what you are saying, because
Right.
the age gap is smaller and this 25-year-old don't really have quite a large pool because the rest are like maybe aunties like myself. But I still think that, come on, just let the intern graduate first or whatever, and then come back as a full-time staff, and then you can make the approach later on.
So the funny thing is, obviously, I shared with my wife this particular incident, right? Then she started bringing up her experience as an intern. And honestly, unbeknownst to me, she was also approached. I mean, there were many things, I think, like comments were made about appearance and all that. You got to know this was like 20 years back, right? So
Yeah.
we are a little less
Times
evolved.
are different, yeah.
And so did she feel uncomfortable? Yes. But I think her point was also to brush it off. So my point in bringing that up is that culture does shift. And I think for the better. We, on our part, didn't want to jump to any conclusions as well. The approach we had was to really find out more. For better or worse, that just even asking, I think, made the other party become quite defensive. Like, no, it's just drinks. What's the big deal? Like, why is this a HR? Because I have to bring someone to have that discussion, right? So, yeah, it's tricky, and I don't have an answer for you. Especially like, if the gaps were closer, then do we let that slide? Yeah, it's difficult.
Love in the workplace don't always end up in a good place.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming in and talking about this subject. If anyone who's listening and you're interested, go and read Kelvin's article. It's on CNA today. It was published yesterday. Have a read and tell us whether you agree or disagree with what we have just said. Send us an email at cnapodcasts@mediacorp.com.sg. The team behind the Work It podcast is Crispina Robert, Junaini Johari, Joanne Chan, Saye Wind. Sound mixing is by Carrie Lim. That's it from us. See you next week.